tell me if you've heard this one before. For the WCC championship on Tuesday at the Orleans Arena will be St. Mary's and Gonzaga. Both of them winning their semifinal games against Pepperdine and USF respectively. And both of them probably going to script, as both of these games were followed very much what we have seen these two matchups be this season and over the years. St. Mary's beating Pepperdine in that first matchup 74-59. USF and Gonzaga in that second one, Gonzaga winning 85-76, a little closer than maybe we've seen in recent matchups, and a closer game overall than I think we've seen in recent matchups, but close in the first half. They separated, so we'll get into all of that in a bit. We'll also get into some news and notes from WCC Commissioner Stu Jackson. He held a press conference earlier today and went over some topics and whatnot that we expect that are obviously going to impact the WCC. A little bit about realignment. We'll get into that. A little bit about the Orleans and what is going to be happening with the WCC tournament in 2026. And of course, we're going to talk about the matchup for the championship, St. Mary's and Gonzaga, as this will be round 3, very similar to what we always are used to. It's almost never not St. Mary's Gonzaga in this tournament. Since BYU left, it has been St. Mary's Gonzaga in the final. So let's get through it. Let's talk about the two matchups we did see tonight. We'll start with St. Mary's, as they were the early game tonight. Again, mentioned they won, beating Pepperdine 74-59. It is their 4th straight trip to the WCC championship game. It is their second consecutive. They are going to be going for their second consecutive WCC tournament championship. And Pepperdine obviously has been the story of the tournament all over the last few days. The Waves knocked off Portland, knocked off Oregon State, knocked off Santa Clara, and the first half of this game kind of went to the script of what we have seen Pepperdine do. They hung around for the first 10 minutes of the first half. St. Mary's did start to pull away and led by 10. And at this point, we've seen them over and over and over again end up in situations where they are down double digits, but have found a way to climb back in. And in the second half, that's those first few minutes, what we kind of expected to see. Was Pepperdine going to climb back in like they have against all these other teams? But this is St. Mary's, and that did not happen. St. Mary's went on a 20-5 run in that second half. They dominated on the glass, as they've done, 45-22. They dominated points in the paint, 46-26. Marshallonis and Paulus Morauskas each had 15. Morauskas had a double-double. He also had 10 rebounds. We got a very typical St. Mary's performance in this game. Kind of the funny note is that the coaching staff actually wasn't really prepped for Pepperdine going into last night, thinking that it was going to be Santa Clara. So there was a kind of an emergency prep for that Pepperdine matchup. So that is something that clearly they did well. Clearly they were able to turn it around. And we did still get to see a great performance from Mo Odom. He had 19 points in this game, 3 assists in his final tournament game. Absolutely, he should be on the all-tournament team. Todorovic also, I think, will get a look as well. He finished with 10 in this game. He obviously had a 34-point game yesterday. Pepperdine, this is going to be a moment, a run that we will remember for a while for the Waves. They came back from double digits in each of their 3 wins. Again, beating Portland, beating Oregon State, beating Santa Clara. They were the underdog in each of them. They were the first 9 seed that reached the semifinals since 2013. Mo Odom in the 4 games, 21 points a game, 9 assists, 3 double-doubles. This was a memorable, magical run for Pepperdine. When you think about the season that the Waves had, just the amount of things that they have had to overcome, the adversity that they had to overcome, and I talk about it a little bit of like that. Sports adversity is kind of like it feels a little much to say, because sports adversity is very different from real life adversity, and Pepperdine faced real life adversity throughout the course of this season, and when you think about the fact that they had two different wildfires threaten the campus. They had to practice off-site. They were trying to find any which place where they could actually play basketball or even just live. When you thinking about how much of Southern California was impacted by the fires, not only in January, but also Pepperdine was impacted back in October as well. They had to go through this twice. And obviously throughout the course of the regular season and the non-conference, it didn't look great at times. They did hang around in a lot of these games, but in this run that they've had, it all came together for them. It was almost a fresh start for the Waves over the last few nights, and they took full advantage of every last opportunity that they had. And you always remember these unexpected runs, probably more than even the expected ones. And so this one is definitely going to stick in my head as one of the memorable moments of the WCC tournament. Pepperdine making this run all the way to the semis as a 9 seed with this team and everything that surrounds the story of what they were able to accomplish. Now, on a very Vegas note, this game also resulted in a bad beat for anyone who put money on this thing. So the spread was 19.5 going into it, and St. Mary's was up 20 with less than a minute to go. And then David Major hit a 3 with 53 seconds left to make it a 17-point game. And the crowd here at the Orleans erupted. Clearly, everyone who had the under and had picked Pepperdine and the points had won their bet. And so it was one of the funnier moments, realizing that that's why everyone cheered in that moment. So definitely a bad beat. I heard somewhere that it actually also ended up on Sports Center about that bad beat, because it definitely was one. Talking with some people, texting with some friends about that. Some of them who had money on picking that over and clearly picked wrong. I would have also picked the over based on the two matchups, but that's why it's a bad beat. That's why I don't bet. That's why I don't gamble really all too much. So, but just that small note. But St. Mary's moves on to the championship game. They will have the opportunity to defend their tournament championship in this one. And this was a pretty balanced performance from St. Mary's, and that is going to be what they're going to bring to the Gonzaga game on Tuesday night. Now, let's get into Gonzaga and USF. They win this game, the Zags win this game 85-76, and the first half followed the script. The script being, we have seen USF and Gonzaga play close first halves over and over and over and over again. It's really competitive. And then in the second half, Gonzaga goes on a run and USF is unable to recover. Well, USF was up 34-28 in the first half. The Zags went on a 7-0 run to take the lead, but then Ryan Beasley hit a 3 to put them back up by 2 at the half. And so maybe it was the opportunity that the story was going to flip. The script might be different this time around, albeit they didn't close the half well. I don't think they closed the half very well, but they were still in the lead when they went to the locker room. Beasley had 10 at the half. Thomas had 9. USF was 8 for 15 from 3. Everything was kind of going their way. Zag shot 37%. Everything going the Dons' way in that first half. Then in the second, this is where it started to go sideways a bit. Zags opened with the first 6 points of the half. It almost felt like we were going to see it all over again. It had the feeling of, oh no, here we go again. But every time, it looked like Gonzaga was going to push it to 8, push it to 10. USF responded. They cut it back to 4, cut it back to 3, cut it back to 1. They continued to fight and kept this game within striking distance. Now, in that second half, Lingard picked up his fourth foul with about 8.5 minutes to go. Wong picked up his fourth a little bit before that. they still had no answer for Graham Ike, which was something that I had talked about going into this matchup, is that they needed to find a way to slow him down. And there was no slowing him down in that second half. He had 17 of his 27 in the second period. Caleb Battle, who has had a very up and down season, a lot of mixed results, but tonight was the best of Caleb Battle. 21 points, 16 in the second half. He was great. Also played really good defense on Malik Thomas. I felt like he made it very difficult for Thomas, even though Thomas had a very good game. He had 27 points, 9 of 18 from the field. He was 5 of 8 from 3. A really good outing from Malik. So they got it back to a 1-point game. It was 62-61. The tide could have turned back in their direction, but then back-to-back buckets from EK to push it to 6. And a couple possessions after that, a floater by Ryan Nemhard, who really kind of had a quiet game, 8 points, 8 assists. His floater made it a 10-point game, which really felt like it sealed the deal for the Zags. Ryan Beasley was taken really out of that second half, only 3 points, 1 for 5 from the field. He finished with 13. This was a very similar result, even though it felt like they got closer. The Dons got closer to be able to beating the Zags. This is the 33rd straight time the Zags have beaten USF, and even though they're inching, I know that for USF, it's not something that they want to necessarily hear. They're tired of it being close, and they're getting closer. They want to be able to break through that. They've been able to do it. They've been able to beat everybody else in the conference, even beating St. Mary's this year, breaking through that ceiling. They have yet to be able to break through the Zags. But unfortunately, they could not get it done in their third opportunity this season, so we'll go into next season needing to do that in what is the final season of Gonzaga being in the WCC. So who knows, after next season, how often these two teams will play each other ever again. This USF team is not done this season. This team is going to more than likely get an NIT bid. They are probably good enough to be hosting an NIT game. So hopefully that we will continue to see this squad play. And get a few more wins. I think this is a team very capable of making a bit of a run in the NIT. So we will see what happens with USF as we move forward with that. So, of course, that brings us back to the final. St. Mary's, Gonzaga, for a third time. And it feels like this is just routine at this point. We know what's going to happen. We know the matchups. We know who's going to be here. We know how this typically plays out. Now, over the last 6 matchups, St. Mary's is 5-1. St. Mary's has done very well against the Zags over the last couple of years. They swept the regular season this year. They took 2 out of 3 last year, including the tournament final. They have been able to close out these close games against the Zags and figure out a formula to be able to overcome the potent offense that Gonzaga always has. And now, again, I say the 5-1. That doesn't mean that they've been running away in any of these games. They have still been close, hard-fought games. The 2 games this year, 62-58 in Moraga, the one in Spokane, 74-67. That one was a little bit more of a separation. St. Mary's was up by 10 in the second half, up by 11 right out the gate in that one. And yes, we could point to the Joe Few situation or whatever else, but St. Mary's did a lot of other things is the reason why they won that game. In both matchups, they dominated the boards. In that second matchup, it was a 39-26 advantage for the Gales. In the first matchup, it was 40-34. They have been able to take care of that part. And in the second game, what we saw a little bit at the end of the first game, but what we saw in the second was the utilization of that double big lineup with Mitchell Saxon and Harry Wessels. And that is something that has disrupted the interior offense of Gonzaga. It has bothered Graham Ike. It has bothered Braden Huff. And that is something that they are going to have to figure out what those matchups are going to look like, because every time one of them ends up on Harry Wessels, it seems like they run into a brick wall. And for Ike specifically, it's become very clear, like, he is dominating the matchup with Mitchell Saxon. He has figured out whatever he needed to figure out to be able to have the advantage almost every time down against Saxon. However, he has not been able to do that yet with Harry Wessels, and that's the matchup if you're going to start to see. And Wessels is not going to start the game by any means, but he's going to be one of those first guys off the bench, and immediately he's going to be paired up with Ike on the defensive end, and that's where St. Mary's can start to not slow them down, but they're going to have a big advantage at that point. And also the fact that Mitchell Saxon can guard the 4. He can get out to the perimeter and still be able to make the plays that he needs to. Again, whether it's Ben Gregg or Michael Ajayi. But we also did see a little bit of Gonzaga's maybe wrinkle to matching up with that. We saw double big lineups from Gonzaga in the game tonight against USF. We saw it a little bit in the matchup against Santa Clara as well. We saw it against USF a little bit as well. Whereas the use of Ismail Diane is a huge part to that. He didn't get to play all too much tonight. They tried it for a small window. It was Diane and Huff in the game at the same time. Diane picked up 2 very quick fouls and wasn't able to stay in this contest. But we got to see Diane's impact against Santa Clara. Less so against USF, because that one was kind of a game that ran away from them from the get-go. And that's something we could end up seeing in the title game on Tuesday night. How is he going to be utilized against a Harry Wessels? How is St. Mary's going to then match up with them? Maybe you do just leave Wessels on Ike and you shift Saxon to playing Diane. We'll see how that all works, but I do think we're going to see a lot of that. I think they're also going to try, obviously, always trying to get Caleb Battle going early on, because if he can continue the rhythm he was in tonight, that bodes very well for Gonzaga going into the matchup on Tuesday. And also in tonight, we saw the last few nights, Ben Gregg has also been one of the big factors. He played very well against USF on last Saturday, not this past game, but the one before. And we also then got to see Michael Ajayi play in kind of relief of Ben Gregg and was solid early on in this contest as well. So they're going to need the others to really step up. Nolan Hickman actually, he was one of the better bright spots in the game in Spokane. He had 14 points. He was 6 for 12 from the field in that one. He even had a couple blocks in that contest. But they are going to need to figure out how to speed up St. Mary's, which obviously is a very difficult thing to do. And this St. Mary's team, which does have a lot of size, is not the fastest team. So if you can try to speed them up, that is maybe how you can take advantage of St. Mary's in the break, in transition, and just get them tired. That's maybe the way you can try to neutralize that double big and force them to go a little bit smaller. Which obviously would play to the Zags' advantage if you go a little bit smaller against them. Now for St. Mary's, it's not as much of continuing to do what you did, because you're going to have to add wrinkles. The double big lineup is working, but are you going to have to throw a wrinkle in there? What if Harry Wessels gets in foul trouble? Are we going to need to see Andrew McKeever in there to be able to stem that tide? You're probably going to need another big night from Mikey Lewis. You're relying a lot on the freshman who all things considered, like, he is still obviously one of the younger players on this team, and one of the most, not the most electric player on this team. He seems to just thrive in the big moments on the big stage. 2 of his best games came against Gonzaga. The other one was in that game against Nebraska in Sioux Falls, which really felt like a road game in that one. So you would expect that you might get another big performance out of Mikey Lewis, but you also are going to need that ball control from a Jordan Ross. Now, even you think about the game against Gonzaga a few weeks ago for St. Mary's at the Kennel. Late in that game, as Gonzaga was trying to put a little bit more pressure and put the press in, Lewis turned the ball over a couple straight possessions, and they had to bring in Ross to be that ball handler one more time. So you do have to worry about the ball pressure, how the different wrinkles that we're going to see, the three-quarter press, the zone defense, like how is Gonzaga going to mix up their defensive packages against St. Mary's and make them more uncomfortable? Because really it feels like if you're Gonzaga, your chief defensive assignment outside of rebound the ball is just hound Mikey Lewis anytime he is in the game. And he's going to be one of those first guys off the bench. You know he's going to look for his shot very quickly in this one. And then you're also going to need, obviously, the leader of this squad to really steer the ship and get them to the finish line. Augustus Marciulionis was the most outstanding player in this tournament a year ago. He had a solid game tonight with those 15 points. It's not going to be the flashiest, but he's going to get the job done. He did a solid defensive job against Mo Odom, much better in the second half of that contest. And the St. Mary's team doesn't seem to be slowing down. They continue to just do exactly what they need to do to get the wins. And I was talking with some people just about this St. Mary's squad, and the one thing I always think about is that comparing them from a year ago to now, is that last year's team, you sometimes would have these ups and downs, a little bit more volatile of a team. But this team doesn't have that volatility. They are very steady. You know exactly who they are, what you're going to get from everybody. They are balanced. And then you might get the big night from a Paulus Morauskas, from a Mikey Lewis, from a Jordan Ross, from a Harry Wessels. You might then have that breakout. And it just makes them that much better. And in this final, I don't know if you necessarily need to have like the quote breakout game. I don't think at this stage I would count Mikey Lewis having like 16 points as a breakout game anymore. That's kind of who he is in these moments. But if you got a big night out of Paulus Morauskas, if you got a big night out of Jordan Ross, that is when you're going to see this team really kind of take that next step. And that's when it could be maybe a bit more lopsided in this games than they have been over the last few times. This game will not be a lopsided game. This game is going to be tight. These games are always tight. This building, even though it is Spokane South, there was a pretty solid St. Mary's contingent in here as well. So this is going to be it's always fun in this game for the championship game. St. Mary's and Gonzaga for a third time. This one is going to will be on the margins. It's who can rebound the best, who can limit their turnovers, and who can control the pace. If St. Mary's gets sped up more times than they would like, this is a Gonzaga game. If St. Mary's can slow the Zags down like they have in the last few matchups, it fits them best. I will make one note. Mitchell Saxon, no more shooting threes. That is one thing that this game does not need. But that said, this is a game for seeding. These two teams are in the NCAA tournament. We know this. These two teams are fighting for what is likely going to be, for the Zags, they probably have locked up at a 7 at this point after beating USF. St. Mary's, depending on who you look at, is anywhere between a 5 and a 6. A win tonight solidifies the 5. A loss maybe slides them back to 6, but maybe it leaves them right where they are. Because very much like the Zags, all the losses for St. Mary's have not been, no one has blown them out. Look, 4 losses, 7, 5, 4, 1. Those are the 4 losses in the point totals. They have done a very good job of setting themselves up well for the NCAA tournament. Obviously, if they finish the job, it's going to be very beneficial. They probably end up in either Denver or Seattle, or at least that's what I think any Gales fans is going to hope for, is that they end up in one of those 2 locations. If Gonzaga ends up winning if Gonzaga wins tomorrow night, they might slide up to a 6 seed. Maybe that's a possibility for them and might push them a little closer to home. in Spokane. All right, and just a couple notes from the topic of during the press conference with Stu Jackson that happened earlier today. The one big note, being here in the Orleans will happen for at least one more year. They have extended the contract, so the WCC tournament will be here in 2026. No word on what is going to be after that. Obviously, we know there's a lot of changes that happen after that. Gonzaga's gone, Washington State's gone, Oregon State's gone. Seattle is in for next year. Also, probably another, at least of season note going into next year with Seattle's addition. It does seem like as of right now that the schools are content with an 18-game schedule on the men's side, and that is going to be where they stay. But with Seattle coming in, that conversation does open up one more time. I honestly think they're going to end up sticking at 18 as well. I don't see them going to 20. With the addition of another team, we'll just have this little bit of imbalanced schedule, a little bit more going into next year, which will be, again, the final year for at least 3 of the current WCC teams, Gonzaga, Oregon State, and Washington State. If you want to watch the full press conference, you can find it on, I uploaded the video onto my YouTube channel, so you can check it out there, listen through the whole thing, and get some also notes about just like the tournament selection committee and how that process works as well. Goes into a little bit more in depth as Stu Jackson talks about that as well. All right, well, that'll do it from the Orleans Arena and this episode of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and follow along on social media at Post by Zach and at unofficial WCC pod. One more night in Vegas, one more game. It is Gonzaga St. Mary's in the championship, as it always is.